Last weekend, Deacon Dave, in his homily, gave us a synopsis of how we read the gospel over a 3-year cycle. And that this year, particularly, we are reading the Gospel of Mark. However, Gospel of Mark is the shortest of all the Gospels. So therefore, to kind of fill in all the weeks, we have an interruption of the regular programming of Mark. And from time to time throughout this year, we will focus on the Gospel of John. And today, that's where we are. Last week, in those opening lines of Mark's Gospel, he tells us exactly what it's all about. It's the good news, the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He tells us who he is, and then afterwards he describes John the Baptist as a messenger. And we heard what he wore, what he ate, where he lived. Very clear, right to the point. And today's opening lines of John's Gospel, which we also have, is a similar kind of direction of describing who Christ will be, a light. But also John, and it's a little different and significantly different. Because as Mark describes it as a messenger, we can interpret messenger in a variety of ways. A messenger can be a person who truly knows the person who's given the message to hand it on, but it also could be an answering service who has no idea. They're just employed to hand on a message, to give it, pass it on. Today, in John's Gospel, he says he's there to give testimony. He's a witness. And as we know, for a person to give a testimony or be a witness means not only are they aware of what's being said, but there's a personal kind of contact. They have an experienced a similarity. They can give testimony because they themselves know what they're testifying to, and they're telling the truth about it. And that's what our relationship is with John, and also of our role as we continue through this Advent season and into a new year. Because we are also called not just to be a messenger and say Merry Christmas to people, but we are people to be people of witnesses, testifying to what we know we also have experienced. It's like the relationship of the sun and the moon to the earth. The moon itself has no light. Where the light comes from is the sun, that it captures and then it glows from it. And that is what our lives are to be as testimony. For us to be a light to the world today, we have to also allow God's Spirit to shine and in many ways impact our lives, because like the moon can only give what it receives, we are only authentically able to give what we receive. And that is our mission and our challenge for us as people of Christ, as disciples. In John's Gospel, as it will unfold, in the end, it will never rely upon just words. It will always be witnesses who bring the presence of Christ to others and will make people, in many ways, be believers. This last week, I had 2 different kinds of experiences being with people who were just kind of pondering and wondering, over the 2,000 years of Christianity, has the world really become any better? When we look at all the darkness around us in many ways and the violence, we wonder, how are we impacting? But as the Holy Father just a year ago released his exhortation, the gospel of joy, is that we are to be people who continue to bring hope to darkness, that we continue to once again light up people to know the presence of God is with us. And that is one of the things that joins us again in the richness of our scriptures, that when we come here, we also remember the past, we bring it to the present to lead us to the tomorrows. And when we remember the past, this first reading from Isaiah, It was a time, and he's talking about hopefulness. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to bring glad tidings, to open the eyes of those who are blind, to be a person of good news to the poor. He wrote that at around 600 BC, when all of Israel and the temple and everything was totally decimated. But he wrote those words because he was a person who still saw and believed God's presence was with them and would bring them to a new beginning, which it did. And when St. Paul, those words that we heard so well in our second reading to the people of Thessalonica, I mean, he was not a pie-in-the-sky person. But what does he say? Rejoice always. Test things yet. But also know that God is with us. Every moment, God is with us. And that is what we are to be. And we're certainly signs of that with all these gifts, reaching out to those in need, that will truly be, hopefully, receiving not only the gift, but as also Deacon Dave said last week, that we don't just give presents, but we give our own presence. And that is what will convert us. That is what will make people believers. And once again, know what is the truth, the way, and the life all of us are called to be. We are people who are always directed by light. That's why the Christmas season this year, we go and see lights. They lift up our hearts. But that's what our challenge is to be, is that we be those light. He came to testify to the light. And people didn't recognize it because they were looking in their own image for a Messiah that was very unlike, as we know, the person of Christ. And people are still looking for those kinds of Messiahs around us, but we are the ones who are called to bring the true Christ, the Christ who Jesus will say when he is an adult and enters to the synagogue in Nazareth, and he unrolls the scroll and reads the same passage we heard today. And he said, in this day, these words are fulfilled. And as we know, people question it. They wouldn't recognize him. But that didn't compromise what he knew and what he became. Let us, as we continue to be the presence of Christ, that we become people of joy in the midst of sadness, that we are people of hope in the people who are living in discouragement in their own lives, that they are connected, that God is with them because the witness and the testimony that we give by our lives. That is what God calls us to be as an Advent people. May that be the true Christmas gift Christ sent that we bring to others.